Hi, welcome back to 8th grade math, Common Core. We're going to start Unit 1, Chapter 1, and remember there are 8 units total, but for our purposes, all we're worried about right now is Unit 1. We're going to have a pretty strong curriculum. We are going to cover a lot of different things. Some things are going to be somewhat challenging. The intent is, in a few months when you start taking your MAP and later your PARCC test, you will be well and prepared to do well on those, and more importantly, you will be ready to take on high school at the placement we have for you. That being said, we recognize that not everyone is going to come into 8th grade remembering every last thing they were ever taught. That's understandable. Now, whether you forgot one little thing or you barely remember anything from a class, that is something we have to address. Now, again, I'm not saying this to make anybody feel bad. I'm just telling you that is the condition that we usually find ourselves in. So what I want to do for the next few segments is to go ahead and quickly cover some of the topics that, yes, you remember, but you might need a little refresher on. Now, that being said, I'm not going to try to take too long per these, but I want to make sure that everyone starts at a fair starting point. And once we've all caught up to that, we will then move in that aggressive pace, getting things done, and you will be happy by your progress. So let's begin. First, I want to talk about decimals. Now, decimals, a quick review. A decimal represents a part of something. It means a piece. So the easiest way to understand is with money. Take $1. Now, I often think of math, especially numbers, decimals, and percents, as money because you're going to find that money has a great history with our decimal and percent systems, but also because if I can see it, I can understand it. And for me, I always like looking at money, and I hope you do too. So take $1. We have 1.00. Now, what that means is the dollar is the whole number. The dollar is the big 1 in front here. Now, 0.00 means that $1 is $1 and there's no change after. It's just 1.00. There's nothing else. Just $1 is $1. You could have also wrote it like this with just the dollar. You don't need the extra stuff, but this just represents that there's no extra change. So anyway, $1 is a whole dollar. Now, if you take a quarter, for instance, you have 0.25. Notice how you don't have a 1 in front. Nope. You just have the decimal, then the 25. That represents that is less than a whole number. So the quarter is obviously less than $1, something you probably knew since first grade, but there's a point to this. So how much is 25 cents? So on your own, consider what exactly does 25 cents mean as far as in relationship to $1? Well, I hope that you knew that there was 4 quarters in $1, and so since it takes 4 quarters to make $1, we're going to examine that in a second. But first, let's take the dime, a little easier to work with. Now, a dime is 0.1. Now, or 0.10 as you're probably more familiar with. Now, if you notice 0.1, the first number after the decimal is what's called the tenths. Now, we're going to get to that. The number on the right is in the tenth column. This is how it works. So the tenth's the first number, so 1 out of 10. In other words, okay, I have a 1 here, and it's out of the tenth, so out of 10 column, so it's 1/10. So 0.1 equals 1/10. Not a big deal. I know it involves fractions, and again, most people like fractions about as much as smashing their hand to a door, but once we see how you work with fractions, I think you're going to find them, if not your favorite, at least manageable. So 0.1 is like 1/10, which is like the dime. So if you add 10 0.1s together, you get 1.0. Or if you add 10 1/10s together, you get 1. Or if you add 10 dimes, you get $1. $1, same thing. And now we're going to do another here. We're going to take the penny. No problem. We know what the penny is. It's 1 cent. Okay, we know this. So here's how it works. There's 2 numbers. Notice you have tenths, hundreds. Now notice how it's just 1, so 1 out of 100. So really 0.01 means 1 over 100, thus the penny. So okay, 0.01, 1 over 100, and the penny. And notice you can have 100 0.01s to make 1. You can have 100 1 over 100s and make 1. Or 100 pennies and make $1. I think you start seeing a theme here. Now, for you to have you normally discuss, but since it's flipped, I'll do the discussing for you. How is this one set up? Well, tell me this. Tenths and what? Tenths, hundreds. So, okay, it's 25 out of said 100. So since it's the 10th column, then the 100th column, we do the 100th column since it's the farthest over. So we take 25 over 100. Since you have a second column number, you use that one. You always use the largest column placement. So, okay, 25 over 100. Yes, I know most of you know that's going to turn into 1/4. We'll get to that soon. Just want to make sure that everyone's fresh with what we have. So 0.25, 25 over 100, a quarter. 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, 0.25 equals $1, as 4 25 over 100s make $1. And you have 25 over 100 also equals 1/4, which is a quarter of $1, which is where the name quarter comes from, because it means a quarter of $1. That's why they initiated the quarter to begin with, because 4 quarters make $1. Now, go ahead and you try. Give me the decimal and fraction, so go ahead and find for me the decimal number representing this. Just think of money, shouldn't be too hard. Then go ahead and put it in a fraction. If you can reduce it, great. If you can't, that's fine for now. Go ahead. And by the way, when I tell you to do U-tries, you can go ahead and pause for a second, work it out, then unpause me. So when I pause for like 1 second, that's when you can pause and unpause and see where we're at. Here we go. So we have 0.05 decimal, no problem. The fraction is going to be 5 over 100. Now, how is that possible? Because remember, it's 5 tenths hundredths. So if you have 5 over 100, that's great for me, no problem. If you know how to convert that into 1 over 20, even better. But at the moment, it's not vital. By the way, the name nickel comes from the metal it was made out of after 1866. Before then, it was made out of silver. So the reason why a 5-cent piece is called a nickel is because they made them out of nickel. Although now I'm not sure they actually make them out of nickel, but they did at that time. That's where the name stuck. Go ahead and you try again. Identify this piece. It, by the way, is a JFK 50-cent piece. If you weren't sure, go ahead and put it in decimal and fraction if you can. Go ahead, pause and try. Okay. Take a look here. Decimal is 0.50 or 0.5. That's fine. Now 10 hundredths. So 50 over 100 is fine with me. If you had 5 over 10, I could accept that. If you knew how to reduce that into 1/2, then you're truly awesome. Good job. Now we're going to, in your skills practice that you'll be handed, I'll be handing to you the next day. See, what I want to do is every time we do work, one of the first things you're going to do in class is going to be a skills practice. So when you come in the morning, this will be the same exact sheet you'll have in front of you. So if you did this on the web program or what you're watching now, you're already halfway done. So let's go ahead and do it together. And by the way, for those who want extra credit, all you have to do is take a piece of paper tonight while you're watching this. Just write this down. You fill out the stuff as I fill it out. Turn it in to me at the beginning of the morning or beginning of class. I'll just take it, write extra credit on top, and you can do that every single day for extra points. Why? Because I'm giving you extra points for doing work at night, which is going to help you the next day. So by doing it, you're helping move class along, you're ahead of the game, so why wouldn't I reward you? Because in the end, you're helping the entire class by coming and being prepared and knowing what you know. So once again, for extra credit, if you want, all you have to do is you simply, when it says skills practice, you go ahead and write down skills practice 1.1a, write down what you see, and as I go through all these, all you have to do is pause and copy it down, take a look at what I'm doing. You could even turn in the next morning and next beginning of class, turn it in, and we're going to do it in class anyway, so you're basically getting double the credit for the same work because you're going to do the same work twice, which is going to help your learning process. You don't have to, but again, for those who like getting higher scores, who want to go ahead and make sure their grade's nice and high, I don't make it difficult. All it requires is a little extra work. Here we go. So penny, the decimal, as we remember, it's 0.01. The fraction of such would be 1 over 100. Why? Because remember, it's 1 cent. Okay. And there's 100 pennies in $1. No problem. Nickel, 0.05. No big deal. And the fraction we're going to start with is 5 over 100. And since we're doing this together, I'm going to tell you that makes 1 over 20. Again, not a big deal. The dime is 0.10 or 0.1, either or. Truthfully, it should be 0.1 for a decimal, but I'm going to use 0.10 since everyone uses that, and the fraction, therefore, is going to be 1 over 10. The quarter is going to be 0.25, and from that, you are going to have a fraction of 25 over 100, but if you then can turn it into 1/4, that would be awesome. And finally, the 50-cent piece, 0.50. You start at 50 over 100, and that turns into 1/2. If you need to, you can go ahead and rewind for a second to write all this down. I don't want to waste your guys' time because I realize you're already watching this video for between 10 and 15 minutes a night, so I'm trying to move things along so that way you can just fast forward or rewind as you need. Now, I gave you all these basic reviews to show you how decimals are important, but money is only a part of the uses. However, most other decimals are used as a percent. For example, left-handed folks, such as Ned Flanders in The Simpsons. Left-handed people are skillful with their left hands when performing tasks. Studies suggest that approximately 10% of the world is left-handed. So let's take 10%. A percent means a number over 100. So when you see the word percent, it just means over 100. So 10% means 10 over 100. Not exactly something you haven't seen before. And 10 over 100, as we're going to cover later, makes 1 over 10. But as a decimal, 10%, since it's a percent which is divisible by 100, you can simply move it 2 spaces over. I will be going over this again later in the program, not today but later on, so don't worry if you have a little trouble. So you can either put it as 10 over 100 or just move it over 2 spaces and make it, excuse me, let me erase that real quick. I did that wrong. What I mean to do is at 10%, you just move the decimal over 2 spaces this way, 1, 2. And that makes 0.10. So either way. Meaning that the whole population as a whole, 0.1 is left-handed. But for many that's hard to visualize, so imagine out of 100 people, 10 out of 100 or 10% would be left-handed. By the way, the money term cents is simply a spin-off of the word percent. So if you ever wonder where the word cents comes from, it's coined from the word percent. So 10 cents is 10% of a dollar. Cent and cent, notice how they're the same. So that's where the word cents comes from. Understand there's an unlimited number of decimals to be used. Take between 0 and 1. So if you have tenths here, you go ahead and have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc. Hundredths, 0.01, 0.02, 0.03. Notice here that when it gets to 0.1, it could also be 0.10. So again, you haven't lost anything. And the next number would be like 0.11. So know that if you're talking about hundreds, you can just count them as 1, 2, 3, 4 and make this 10, 20, 30, 40. Or if you count them by tenths, it could be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, but the value is the same. You're just looking even closer. Another visual is what each decimal place represents. So here we have tens, hundreds, thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. Those are all in front of the whole number. So again, those are things that are whole numbers. We don't have to worry about parsing them out. But tenths, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000, millions, 10 millions, and 100 millions. Notice how the only difference is you're adding a 0 at the bottom of every one. The farther you go, the more you cut it up, the bigger the 0 on the bottom. Means smaller, smaller, smaller piece every time. So take 70%. All you have to do is say, okay, 70%, tenths, 100, excuse me, percent means over 100, sorry. So 70 over 100. Okay, no big deal. 70 over 100. And then if you want, you can just take 70 divided by 100 with your calc and take 0.7. No biggie. Or you just go 2 spaces to the right, as we talked about before, and that gives you 0.7. 1, 2. Either way. Notice how 0.7 is right in the tenths columns here. So that's no big deal. If you had 0.70, notice how to be 70 over 100 again. Notice how you can either have 0.7 for tenths or 0.70 for hundredths. It means the same thing. We just slapped a 0 at the end. Not a big deal.